Hey folks, my name's Rene Enriquez and you are watching Uncensored.
This is Rene Enriquez. Nickname Boots. Black Hand of the Mexican Mafia. Prison gang politics.
Hey folks, my name's Rene Enriquez and you are watching Uncensored. Well, welcome back to another episode of my Debrief. This is my Debrief, and it's been played a gazillion times on YouTube and every other form of social media. But I ran across this, and I thought, what better than to explain my Debrief to individuals who watch my channel, right? So it's my story, explain. I'm going to give you a little breakdown, little anecdotes that we're talking about here. We left off at about 10 minutes, right? Because the first episode we did, we had a bunch of preamble. Showed you video clips, all that. But let's get straight to the debrief. Before we do, folks, I want to remind everybody to support the channel by watching the video in its entirety, hitting that hype button, and leaving a comment, hitting the thumbs up, all the good stuff. Be sure to subscribe. We're trying to get to that 100,000 mark by the end of the year. That's our goal, 100,000 by December. I think we can do it. We made 50,000 in record time, and that's our next benchmark. All right, folks, this is me in Walnut Station, participating in my initial debrief for the CDCR. The individual interviewing me is Lieutenant Ernie Madrid. He flew in from Pelican Bay State Prison to do this debrief. It was actually for the legislature and the governor's office that this debrief was done. And at the time, I was being housed at Walnut Station in Walnut, California. I was flown there by the FBI and housed there for about 13 months. So with that said, let's get on with the debrief. Let's crank up the volume and let's run it.
Okay, and this could be a wife or a girlfriend or a brother or a friend. What is that? Somebody that the member trusts?
It's somebody that the individual, the Mexican Mafia member trusts without reservation or hesitation. This is an individual that he issues murder orders to, assault orders, who has his money. Usually it's a wife. He's just a wife or girlfriend. Because he'll know where his money's at, exactly what's happening with his money. And you have to entrust these individuals with large amounts of money. And oftentimes the wives are more powerful than the Mexican Mafia members or the crew chiefs. They have ultimate authority. And oftentimes these women become power crazy. I've seen it over and over. These women are ordering murders, issuing assaults, having people extorted on a regular basis. I believe that if you sat back and listened to tapes emerging from Pelican Bay visiting room, you'd detect quite a bit of this activity occurring every weekend.
Okay. So the crews, when you talk about they're made up of earners and crew chiefs and crew leaders, these are Sureños also?
They are.
Okay. They're just not in prison.
They don't have to be in prison to be a Sureño. You don't have to come to prison to be a Sureño. You just have to be from Southern California. But they are Sureños as well.
Okay.
Some of them have been to prison. Most of them haven't.
So the Mexican Mafia has control over the Sureños inside prison and the Sureños in the street gangs outside prison?
Oh, they infiltrated those gangs years ago.
That is an important fact that the Mexican Mafia established the relationship with Sureños early on. In fact, we talked about some of the relationships with the organization and Sureños before Sureños were even a thing, right? And it's always been an abusive one. And we talked about that in the NF segments that we did, the episodes that we did recently, how different gangs broke off, the Maravillosos, the Nuestra Familia. They all did that because they were tired of being victimized. And that's the absolute truth. But since then, the Mexican Mafia has gone about cultivating relationships with Southern California street gangs and actually have metastasized. They've spread everywhere. There's upstaters, there's Sureños in Oregon, Washington, you name it, there's Sureños everywhere. And the Mexican Mafia is in the process of developing those relationships too, because it doesn't just want to control California. That's not its objective, right? More territory, more money, and that's the goal. But the relationship has been cultivated with the Hispanic street gang subculture. That's a better way to look at it. That the Mexican Mafia has insinuated itself in the Hispanic gang subculture, and people aspire to be Mexican Mafia members still, even with all the stuff we put out and all the content creators that create video on this issue. There's still a number of people that want to live this life, and to those people I say, it's not everything it's cracked up to be. Believe me when I tell you that it's not all glory. There's very little honor. There's a lot of betrayal and ultimately death. That's the reality of the organization. But for those who are going to go with it, go. You'll learn the hard way. And some guys will just do that their whole lives, and that's who they are. They're cut out to be that, and I just wasn't. And I'm happy that I left. And for anybody considering leaving, I'd say do it now, before it's too late. Here we go.
I think that's evidenced by the Mexican Mafia halting drive-bys in 1993. I was fundamental in that concept. I had spoken with Chuco Castro, Jesse Moreno, individuals who had been indicted previously in the first round of indictments in 1993. And we formulated a strategy to infiltrate the gangs by halting drive-bys. At one point, they had meetings with thousands of individuals. And this is the power of the Mexican Mafia. They can snap their fingers and ask individuals to stop shooting at each other, and they will do it. Or they can say, shoot at people, and then they will do that. On the flip side of that power, the Mexican Mafia's influence is broad. It's vast. I think it's hard to articulate how much influence the Mexican Mafia has in street gangs. But it does exert quite a bit of power over Southern California.
That original concept to infiltrate street gangs by calling a halt to drive-bys was like the moment that the organization transitioned from prison gang to criminal syndicate. I think that was the birth of the real Mexican Mafia. I mean, it was a prison gang before that, right? And some cardenales got out, and Mundo's era, Shai's era, Alfie's era, and they did dirt, right? They established the organization in terms of terror and its violence, its reputation, its ferocity. But the ability to do business on a large scale like this was just happenstance. I mean, it wasn't a formulated plan. Like, we didn't understand contemporary business practices like franchising and vertical leadership system and horizontal integration and profit sharing and brand recognition. We didn't understand any of that. We were just doing it, and it started off with just a group of guys, me being one of them. Little Mo, Reese, Chaco Padilla, Chuco Castro, Pee-wee Aguirre, Shai, Black Dan. A lot of these guys were fundamental in this, and they really implemented the street meetings, right? And thousands of people showed. That was the awesome power of the organization being displayed in all of its brute force. And cops were there. Cops videotaped it. They had informants in the crowd, but it spread. It spread like wildfire. It was a thing where gangs were eliminating people indiscriminately, just boom, 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 boom. I think at the highest peak it was 1,000 or 1,900 eliminations due to street gang violence in Los Angeles County alone. So this hit at a peak, and when the cardenales said stop, everybody stopped. It didn't stop in its totality, right? Because there was still stuff going on. But they established some kind of protocol for these gangs to follow, and they felt included. This is the first time in history where real cardenales were out there in the masses, intermingling with gang members. So it gave gang members like a sense of being, a sense of belonging. And I think it was like an opportune time for the organization to do this. And this is really when the organization went from being a prison gang to a street criminal organization.
Could you put a number to the amount of people that Mexican Mafia controls inside a prison and on the gangs on the streets?
I think it's pretty difficult to quantify. I mean, if you break it down into raw numbers, I think a conservative estimation would be 30 to 50,000 individuals, including street gang members and prison gang members, individuals that will follow the Mexican Mafia's orders and explicitly, implicitly, they will adhere to the Mexican Mafia rule without a doubt. 30,000 easy, 50,000 easy.
Okay. Earlier you brought up indictments. Do indictments do anything to deter a Mexican Mafia member from doing organized crime, murders, extortion, any of those things?
No, some of the members actually seek to be indicted to further their criminal enterprises. But some indictments do send the Mexican Mafia reeling, indicting wives, family members, seizing money.
So, that point there, indictments devastate the organization. I mean, it doesn't really stop the machinery and the infrastructure, because if you take out one crew, another crew is going to come in and fill the void, or another carnal is going to take over the territory and reestablish that. But the discovery that comes out during this process, the discovery meaning evidence that's captured by law enforcement and turned over to the defense, these are pieces of evidence that are used in prosecution, right? This stuff devastates the organization. When one carnal is talking bad about another carnal on the phone, or they're politicking to eliminate somebody, or there's territorial encroachment, like, you know, you violate somebody's turf and you're distributing product there, or collecting from people that don't belong to you. All this comes out, and it creates quite a stir in the organization, because it starts the politics, it starts the infighting, right? And the fact that the government goes after women now, I mean, it has no mercy for them. Whereas before, they wouldn't prosecute women. They would not prosecute women. Very rarely did you see a wife or a señora prosecuted. But now they go after them with the full force and the full weight of the United States government. And we've seen that a number of times. Sky Burgeon being one of them, Laura Hernandez being another. And just recently, Johnny Martinez's wife took a plea bargain for facilitating his criminal activity. And she turned herself into the feds. And this is maybe a month or two ago. But it happens on a regular basis now. I think the United States government got it right when they said, okay, we're going to go after the crews in their totality rather than just cherry picking the leadership. And it really does wreak havoc on that specific carnal and his crew. But as I said, there are some members that seek to be indicted because they're doing all day anyways. They're doing life without, or multiple lives, and they know they're never getting out. So to be able to go to a federal facility and operate there, it's just a financial opportunity for them.
Hurting them. When you hurt the Mexican Mafia, where it has its most value, where it has its most prized possessions, that's deterrent factor to them. Seizing their property, taking their money, indicting their wives. But the indictments themselves, this is nothing to an individual doing life sentence. If you were to give me another life sentence, what would it really do? Other than give me a life sentence. One life sentence in California is as good as 10 life sentences. So what's the difference if I pick up 10 more along the way? All you are is you're bolstering my image in terms of the California underworld because I'm being indicted. What's really needed is the ultimate sanction in terms of these individuals, because a lot of them are irredeemable. They're incorrigible. They cannot be corrected. So an ultimate sanction is needed. Ultimate measures need to be taken. Indictments only incite them. And that's the only result of an indictment for a Mexican Mafia member that's doing life.
Okay. Now, Rene, I assume for a member who's...
Let me interject there. This was at a time, like when I said one life sentence is as good as 10 life sentences, this was at a time when parole wasn't being granted. Very rarely did a governor grant parole. All the way back to Gray Davis and Pete Wilson, they would rarely grant parole, and it had to be like a highly political case where somebody had influence with the governor's office, and they might do it, right? And they were pretty rare. I remember, I think it was under Gray Davis, it was Gray Davis. He said flat out that no murderer would ever parole from California. And he meant it. He meant it. I think that year there were only 27 paroles. Now compare that to the numbers now where thousands of lifers are paroling every year. Times have changed, but this was at a time when you could not get out of prison on a life sentence. So cooperating didn't mean anything. It really didn't mean anything. It was just, it wasn't going to come into play with the governor's office because they were dead set against it. And I'd like to retract what I said right there, that people were incorrigible. Not incorrigible, incorrigible. Remember that video between Tablas and the Queen of Florencia where she says they're incorrigible? No, it's incorrigible. All right, so look, I firmly believe in rehabilitation, and that's my stance, right? Because if I can change, anybody can change. And I've seen a lot of lifers go through the ultimate maturation process where they grow up and they rid themselves of gang mentality and develop, empathy and understanding of what they've done, and they have insight, right? So I'm going to retract that right there when I said that some of them are irredeemable. I don't think anybody's irredeemable. If they make a conscious decision to participate in a violent lifestyle, well, then that's their choice, and they'll suffer the consequences for that, and that will mean the rest of their life in prison. But anybody can change. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
Say incarcerated inside a Pelican Bay State Prison, for him to be able to dictate and have this kind of control with street crews, main lines, everybody that he's controlling, he has to have pretty good communication with these people. Now, you know that the Department of Corrections monitors the communication. We monitor mail, listen to visiting tapes, try to watch you guys as close as we can. How do you guys communicate with those kind of sanctions imposed on you?
Visiting. Let's take visiting, for example. Visiting every weekend, every month, throughout the year. There are RICO activities. There are organized crime activities occurring out there on a regular basis. I know this because I used to participate in them.
This is in the Pelican Bay visiting?
Pelican Bay visiting, every visiting room throughout California. County jails, everywhere. Individuals from the Mexican Mafia affiliates, strong associates, and camaradas continue these communications in the furtherance of the Mexican Mafia activities. Each individual has a specific crew. He has an individual that visits him, and he communicates with that individual, his wife, girlfriend, his friend, and they have a specific established code. Say, for instance, I understand that Pelican Bay listens to my visiting tapes, and say, for example, you're my visitor. Understanding that an individual is monitoring and taping my conversations through past indictments, we understand every monitoring and surveillance technique utilized by Pelican Bay. We understand completely what Pelican Bay is capable of, and it's not very much. Say, for example, that you were my visitor, and I needed to talk about a crew member paying a specific amount of money. I'd say, how's everything at home? You would tell me, everything's fine. Joe came by last month and he helped me in the garden. He planted 4 rose bushes, and he says he'll come back every month to help me maintain the yard. To the individual monitoring this tape, it sounds like Joe came by and helped my wife do gardening in the front yard and planted some rose bushes. To me, I understand this to be that Joe came by and paid me $400 last month, and he says he's going to be by every month to pay $400. Carnival talk, this carnival talk that we like to call it. And this...
This is really my forte right here, right? When they ask me to analyze communications, it's for this type of communication. And back in this time, right, even I understood that we were being electronically monitored. They had this simple recording system. They didn't even have cameras in their visiting room yet. And they were using like little cassette tapes to record. And they really weren't understanding what they were listening to, right? Pelican Bay was in its nascency in terms of gang investigations. And they had all the big wigs there, all the shot callers, all the bosses were in Pelican Bay State Prison. But even then, I had enough awareness to realize that this is dangerous, communicating openly about crew activities, and I veiled everything. And this is called informal gang code, which is a manner of communication in which two individuals are predisposed to understand the underlying content. Right? In other words, I talk to you, and you know that I'm giving you a message, and then you're sharp enough to figure out what I'm saying. And sometimes you'll hear that in visits, like in the Tabla series when they're talking about CDs and somebody using Tablas' name for 40K. That they have to go over and over to get a full understanding of what they're saying. But it wasn't like today. Back then, it wasn't like today. There was some discretion in the communications. I wouldn't say that for old catfish lips, Raul Leon, because he was overt in his communication, and I've shown you that already. But then like old Uncle Fester. Uncle Fester is not discreet at all. A lot of carnales are not discreet, but there are some who were discreet and went through great pains in order to circumvent the security practices at Pelican Bay and other law enforcement that had interest in the Mexican Mafia.
This innocuous form of conversation to circumvent the things, the security measures, but we also use streets, individuals soliciting my endorsement for the creation of new crews, mafia payments, which I have photocopies of here, even instances where individuals use trust accounts to launder money, and I think we'll get into that in a minute, but the correspondence is utilized on a frequent basis. So
Those were letters. Those were letters that I showed there, and payments and kites and all kinds of stuff, right? That's just all kinds of stuff that I collected, right? And it's after I dropped out, right? After I dropped out, so this mail still was pouring in, right? The last bit of mail and communications were still pouring in, and it was a big binder full of stuff that I had, and I turned that over to the IGIs and the feds. Everything, you turn over everything when you debrief, right? It's that's just the way it is, right? Like I said, everybody has their own experience, right? But this was my debrief, and it was pretty extensive, right? It went on for 13 months, and it wasn't just with this one agency; it was multiple agencies that I debriefed for. So that was just correspondence. That was a real way of communicating back in the day. If you communicated effectively enough, you could get away with it in correspondence, and they wouldn't flag it. Now that's almost an impossibility, and we'll be showing you something in the near future how they intercept some coded communication in correspondence.
Correspond with anybody we want to at any time, with no limitations on the amount of correspondence we can receive or send. So for us, correspondence is a wonderful avenue to conduct our activities. You have to understand that when a Mexican Mafia member writes somebody a letter, specifically regarding illicit activities, this letter, usually of endorsement, is like a letter akin to a letter of safe passage. And these individual drug dealers, they use these letters to protect themselves from other individuals attempting to extort them. So mail is utilized for a multitude of reasons.
What about legal mail?
Legal mail is used to circumvent screening by CDC, and it's utilized by Mexican Mafia members today. I've personally utilized it to transport narcotics, relay messages to federal members and state members. There are two individuals now, Chato Sandoval and Gangster Marquez, that are communicating through their attorneys on a regular basis with Mexican Mafia members in Pelican Bay and the feds as well. So, and the feds means federal prison members. That's what we term them in the feds.
Okay.
But
yeah, Chato Sandoval, Chato from Arizona Maravilla, and Gangster Marquez, CDC had already been intercepting their letters. In fact, everybody thought that legal mail was like this protected thing, and it was at one time. But once it was revealed that Mexican Mafia members are utilizing legal mail, they were cracking open any legal mail. They would contact the attorney and find out if they were actually represented by this. They actually represented this person, and in the cases where they weren't, they were going into that mail. In fact, Tonito from Wilmas was prolific at doing this. He would just get a letterhead and send out a bunch of legal mail. I have some examples of that. I'll show you at some point. But yeah, legal mail was a thing at the time because it was protected. All I could do was open it and give it a cursory examination. So we'd send in a thick packet of transcripts, and within those transcripts is a message or an entire page of communication or illicit substances. That's one way that we always use to get in Glauel.
Legal mail is one of the, it's a bane to the CDC.
So, you're aware that the Title 15 in the Department of Corrections only allows an officer to open the envelope, inspect the mail to make sure there's no contraband inside, but they cannot read the contents of that mail.
We understand that specifically, and that's one of the reasons we utilize is the legal mail, because we understand that they can't read the content of the letter. They can only screen it for, shake it out for contraband. And if it contains no contraband, then they have to turn over the letter to the inmate. And this can contain information about murders, blatantly written, and we have to, no worries whatsoever about authorities intercepting this communication because we understand it's protected.
Now, a lot of times you use the lawyers for this legal communication.
The lawyers understand. We've infiltrated quite a bit of the attorneys we come in contact with, and I'm certain that they understand what they're doing. That they understand that they're facilitating Mexican Mafia communications in different facilities and even in society.
Why would a lawyer do this? Does the Mexican Mafia pay them?
The Mexican Mafia pays some attorneys. It has some paid attorneys. Other attorneys do it because they're caught up in the mystique of the organization or swayed by its influence or its power.
There were a number of attorneys that got caught up in indictments, and I won't say their names here, but there were some that were quite chummy with us. They would send letters, and I'd send letters, and they'd send letters back. They get the responses from the members, and we communicated that way. This is a reality. Everybody knows this, right? I think due to the recent indictments in the past 5 years or so of attorneys, everybody understands now that this is not a safe method of communication. This is not.
Okay. So far we've talked about in communication for Mafia members, they communicate through the visiting, through regular institutional mail, and through legal mail.
Mm-hmm.
What other forms of communication do they have?
If they have access to phones, they utilize phones, like in the county jails, and when they go out to court, and those phones are a boon to them in terms of their business. They can communicate specifically and personally with individuals that generate money for them. There's also trips OTC, we call it OT numbers, and the CDC paid for the trip.
Okay. Back in May.
So OTC is out to court. That's the subpoena system. We would get individuals to subpoena us for their cases as character witnesses and come out to court. That would be, we'd be moved from Pelican Bay to the county where those individuals who subpoenaed us were held. And that afforded us the opportunity to communicate, conduct business, eliminate people if we had to. In fact, it was a system that was widely abused in Los Angeles for a long time. A lot of county council and district attorney's office now oppose the mass transfers of inmates to their county. They oppose it in court, and if they do approve it, the courts do approve it, because a criminal defendant has the right to bring character witnesses or material witnesses from wherever they are. And once they issue a subpoena, they bring them not to the county of record, but they take them to a local facility like a prison or a federal housing, and they hold them there. They hold them in almost complete isolation. And then as soon as they testify, they bounce them right back. They put them on the first thing smoking back to the prison they were subpoenaed from. So they've kind of cut that out. It was a huge thing back in the day, and it was happening when I did this debrief.
Now, the institutional mail, sometimes, or a lot of the times, Mexican Mafia members will screen their mail a lot heavier than the Serenos or the associates, because we know
Their hand and send it out in their name. The recipient, who's a member of your crew or an individual you're doing business with, understands that it's you speaking to them. It's just another individual writing it. And what he'll do is he'll respond to your letter writing to the individual who wrote it. So when the letter arrives, the individual who originally wrote it will provide you with his response, and you circumvent the whole process. It's pretty simple. The mail system is one of the best things in the world for the Mexican Mafia.
What's a third-party mail drop?
A third-party mail drop is it's not a very sophisticated system. It's a system which the Mexican Mafia uses quite frequently. It's an individual in society that receives letters from prisons, and once he receives a letter from prison, understands this letter is going to somebody else, what they'll do is they'll take that letter, place it in another envelope, address it, and mail it on its way. So they receive mail from one institution and mail it to another institution. And we circumvent security procedures that way as well.
Because the CDC, this was done because the CDC had a policy that inmates could not correspond directly with inmates unless you're approved, and they very rarely did it. They'd only do it if you had a true familial relationship with the individual. But that was like a huge thing, mail drops, right? You'd have an address to a carnal, and you'd send a letter there, and that person would forward it to the carnal or a camarada. There was a lot of communication done that way.
And you have to understand that this is so complex of a system that every individual has multiple addresses at his disposal to communicate with anybody in the United States if we need to. I have addresses in Kansas, and New Mexico, in Arizona, California, everywhere you can imagine. Everywhere you can imagine, we have addresses where we can communicate with individuals from the Mexican Mafia.
Okay. Say an individual's paroling out of Pelican Bay State Prison. Mm-hmm. Will they take messages to the street?
We frequently send out messages, written kites of highly sensitive information in terms of killing fellow members, enforcing specific edicts from prison, objectives for crews. Individuals paroling will swallow these communications, which are wrapped in plastic, water sealed, or they'll secrete them in a body cavity in a fashion called keister stashing, which is a bit graphic, which I won't describe here, but I'm sure that everybody can pretty much conclude what that means.
That means sticking it up your butt. And it's a common method of transportation for contraband, right? Knives, drugs, money, kites, communication. They're all put in the safe. Because, let's face it, nobody's going to go looking in there, right? But they do. They do. Believe it or not, when we're in mass transports, if they suspected you of containing or possessing contraband, they would put out a 5-gallon bucket with a plastic bag over it, right? And they would run us all to the metal detectors and the wands, and they threaten to take you to X-ray, and they give you the opportunity to poop it out right there. And it's been done to a number of people. Or they would bring out the instruments that they were going to use to go inside of you and get it, right? And they'd show you. They put them on a little tray. It's like a little a plexiglass tube, about the circumference of a toilet paper roll, the core, and they had forceps and all kinds of stuff. They said, like, we're going to take it out of you if you don't give it to us. This is when they had reason to believe that somebody was in possession of contraband inserted in the rectum. And I knew a number of guys that just pooped out whatever they had. So, all right, here you go. They're busted. You know, why go through the discomfort of having a plexiglass tube stuck up there and them forcibly taking it out? They would also take you to court. They would go get a court order to do that at the prison. They would do it. And this is back in the knuckle dragging days when they would really do it. Or they would put you on 5 points. They would put you on 5 points. They would put you in a hospital bed where you're restrained. All your body is restrained, and they keep you there for 3 days until you have 3 different bowel movements. And let's face it, nobody can hold it for that long. So at some point, you're going to go, and it's going to come out, and they'll extract it from your fecal matter, the contraband that you have contained in your rectum. This is really, really brutal days in the CDC, and it happened. With that said, I think we're going to stop here and continue on another episode in the future. Hope you like this episode, folks. This is really what debriefing is, and this is what it breaks down to, because after the videos, you go into interviews and recordings and all kinds of stuff, right? And remember, this was done 30 years ago, about 30 years ago. And look at the quality of the video. It's pretty grainy. You can't even make out my eyes. And that was, of course, 25 pounds ago and a lot more hair. And it wasn't gray. But I was a young buck then, had all my tattoos, all that stuff. But you get a look into a real debriefing of a real Mexican Mafia member with people who are trained to do debriefings, right? And this is what it entails. I hope you like this video, folks. With that said, I'll end it here. Have a great weekend. Have a great week. What am I saying? Weekend. I'm tripping. All right, folks. As always, we appreciate your viewership. We appreciate your support. And most importantly, we appreciate you. With that said, peace out.
This is Rene Enriquez. Nickname Bootser.